The stock market crashed in 2000 and 2001 and 2002, and then again in 2008, again in 2020, again in 2022, and again in 2026. That's 7 major drops in 26 years. And if you had money in a TSP, an IRA, or a 401k during any of those years, you already know what it feels like. You log in, the number is smaller, sometimes it's a lot smaller. And the only advice that anyone gives you is stay the course, right? Stay the course while your retirement savings evaporate. Now, I'm not here to predict when the next crash will happen because nobody can do that, but I can tell you this with absolute certainty. It will happen. It always does. Okay, the only question is whether your retirement savings are sitting in a structure that gets destroyed when it hits or one that's completely protected from it. Because those are 2 different retirements. And unfortunately, most veterans are in the wrong one without even knowing that there's a choice. So I'm Dan Farnsworth, retired naval officer, 23 years of service, and founder of Victory X Financial. And let me show you exactly what market crashes have done to veterans' retirement savings and the structure that makes the next one completely irrelevant. Now let me walk you through what actually happened to the TSP during these crashes, because most veterans remember the feeling, but they don't necessarily remember the numbers. And the numbers, I can tell you, are worse than the feeling. So in 2008, the C Fund, which tracks the S&P 500, and that's where most TSP money sits, it dropped over 38%. So if you had $300,000 in the C Fund at the start of that year, you had roughly $186,000 by the end of it. So $114,000 gone in 12 months. And here's what people forget about that drop. A 38% loss doesn't just require a 38% gain to recover. It requires a 61% gain. Because you're recovering from a smaller base, okay? If your $300,000 dropped to $186,000, that $186,000 needs to grow 61% just to get back to where you started. Not ahead, but back to even. The S&P didn't fully recover from the 2008 crash until about 2013. So that's 5 years of your retirement timeline that's just burned getting back to zero. And then in 2022, the C Fund dropped again over 18%, and the S Fund dropped over 26%. So veterans who were planning to retire that year, they basically had a choice. You either retire into a diminished portfolio, or you just push the timeline back and you keep working. And then in 2026, so this year, it happened again. Veterans watched their TSP balances drop while being told again to just stay the course, to just wait it out, to trust the process. Well, let me ask you something. How many times does your retirement savings have to get hit before you ask a different question? Not when will it recover, but why is my money in a position where this keeps happening? Because the crashes aren't the problem. Where your money is sitting is the problem. And I want to show you something that fundamentally changes how you think about things like market risk and retirement savings. Because most people understand crashes in terms of percentages, but they don't understand what those percentages actually cost in years. So let's say you're 50 years old with $400,000 in your TSP and you're planning to retire at 62. Now a 30% crash hits and your $400,000 drops to $280,000. Well, now you need roughly a 43% gain just to get back to the $400,000. And at historical average returns of 8 to 10%, that recovery takes about 4 to 5 years, and that's assuming that there are no additional crashes during the recovery period, which, as we've just established, is not something you can count on. So a 30% crash at age 50 doesn't just cost you $120,000, it costs you 4 to 5 years of compounding on a larger base, right? The money that $400,000 would have grown into during those years, that's gone too. So the total cost of that single crash when you account for loss compounding is closer to $200,000 by the time you reach 62. And if that crash happens at 58 instead of 50, well, you just don't have time to recover, right? You either retire with significantly less money or you keep working for years longer than you planned. Now here's what makes this even worse. If you're already retired and you're withdrawing income when the crash hits, the damage compounds in the other direction. So you're pulling money out of a shrinking account, right? Every withdrawal locks in more of a loss. That's what we call sequence of returns risk, and it's the reason why veterans run out of money in retirement even when their long-term average returns look fine on paper. And this is not a hypothetical risk. This is exactly what happened to veterans in 2000, in 2008, in 2022, and even this year, 2026. So repeatedly and predictably, look, it will happen again. And here's the question: what if your retirement savings could participate when the market goes up, but never go backwards when it crashes? Well, that's not a fantasy. That structure exists, and that's exactly what we build for veterans at Victory X Financial. It's called a market-protected indexing strategy, and here's how it works. So your retirement savings, whether that's a TSP, a 401k, old IRAs, they get rolled over through a tax-deferred transfer, so there's no taxes due on the rollover. So your money just moves from a structure that's directly invested in the stock market into one that's linked to market indexes but not directly invested in the market. And that distinction is everything. Because when the S&P 500 goes up, let's say 15%, your account gets credited with growth. And in many structures, you're participating at high rates, some with no cap on the earnings. And you can also receive upfront premium bonuses that help accelerate your growth even more in the early years. But when the S&P 500 drops, say 30% like it did in 2008, your account just gets credited zero, okay? Not negative 30, but just zero. So your principal is protected. Your previous gains, those are locked in. So basically the crash happened around you and not to you. And then when the market recovers, you're not just climbing out of a hole, okay? You're growing from the same base that you had before the crash. And while the veteran with a traditional TSP is spending 3, 4, even 5 years or more just getting back to even, your money keeps compounding from a protected position the entire time. Now, over a full career of saving, let's say 20, 25, even 30 years, the difference between losing 30% multiple times and never losing anything is massive. We're not talking about marginally better returns. We're talking about potentially doubling or even tripling your principal over the next 10 to 20 years. Not because the gains are higher, but because the losses don't exist. That's not beating the market, that's just refusing to play the game that keeps destroying veterans' retirement savings. And let me show you what this looks like in real practice. So let's say we have a veteran couple, let's say age 45, okay, recently retired from the service, and they got, we'll say $200,000 in the TSP. Now they've watched the market drop twice in the last 4 years, and they're pretty much done gambling with their retirement. Okay, so we roll $200,000 into a market-protected accumulation strategy. It's tax-deferred, so there's no taxes due on the transfer. And the management fees that they were paying inside their old account, even the TSP, which are small, those fees are gone. And maybe they even receive an upfront premium bonus. So now their money participates in index growth with no direct market downside. So if the market crashes next year, and I mean it might, right? Their $200,000 doesn't just become $140, it stays at $200,000 plus whatever gains they've already been credited. Now, based on historical return assumptions, that balance is projected to grow to approximately $600,000 by age 55. And not because of extraordinary gains, but because of uninterrupted compounding. There's no crashes to recover from, so no lost years, just steady, protected growth. Now at 55, we reposition the funds again into an income-focused strategy, and maybe even another bonus applies, okay? And they get guaranteed compounding on the income base from day one. Now by 65, their income base exceeds $1.2 million, and they turn on income at over $93,000 per year for life. So both spouses are covered, okay? There's no market crash, not the next one, not the one after that can reduce that income by a single dollar. And now let's look at a veteran couple who's closer to retirement and, well, frankly, has more to lose. Okay, let's say they're age 62 and they got $500,000 that's combined across multiple accounts, right? We got old 401ks, maybe a TSP, IRAs, that sort of stuff, okay? The husband has a military pension and gets VA compensation, and they just turned on Social Security. So right now, that $500,000 is fully exposed to the next crash. So if the market drops 30% tomorrow, they lose $150,000. And at 62, they don't have time to recover that. Okay, their retirement income drops permanently. So instead, we move the $500,000 into a tax-deferred, market-protected structure, and they get guaranteed 8% annual compounding on their income base with full downside protection, so no market crash can touch the balance. And they delay income until 67, partly to let the guaranteed compounding work, but partly to avoid large withdrawals that could increase their Medicare premiums through IRMAA. Okay, and now at age 67, their income base has grown to over $730,000, and they turn on income. And it's approximately $55,000 per year, guaranteed for life. Okay, both spouses are covered for as long as either one is alive. The next crash could happen the day after they turn on the income, and the one after that could happen 5 years later. It doesn't matter. Their $55,000 per year doesn't change. Their income is contractually guaranteed regardless of what the market does. And that's the difference between just hoping the crash happens at the right time and knowing that it doesn't matter when it happens. Now, I want to be direct about something. Every crash has a warning period where people kind of feel it coming, okay? The market gets volatile, the news gets nervous, veterans start thinking, maybe I should be doing something about my TSP, and almost none of them do. Because, I mean, let's face it, doing nothing is easier than making a decision. So they wait, okay? And then the crash hits, and then it's too late. You can't protect your money that's already been lost. And then the market recovers, the anxiety fades, and they go right back to doing nothing again until the next crash. And the cycle repeats. Now, every single time the veterans who moved their savings into a protected structure before the crash, they kept everything. And the veterans who stayed the course lost years of progress. Look, I'm not asking you to time the market, okay? Nobody can do that. I'm asking you to stop requiring your money to survive market crashes just to fund your retirement, because there's a structure where it doesn't have to. And every day that your savings sit exposed is a day that you're choosing to accept a risk that doesn't need to exist. The next crash is not a question of if, it's a question of when. And the only decision is whether your money is protected before it happens or destroyed when it does. So here's the next step. Click on the link below and just book a free strategy session with me, okay? There's no cost, there's no obligation. And on that call, we'll look at exactly what you have, okay? Your TSP, your 401ks, your IRAs, and I'll show you two things. First, what happens to your current savings in the next 30% crash? Okay, the actual dollar amount that you would lose, so not just a percentage, but a number with a dollar sign in front of it. And when you see that number, it'll get your attention. And second, what happens if we move those same savings into a market-protected structure before the next crash? So the growth, the income, the protection, the guarantee. And you'll see both scenarios side by side, okay? So your money exposed versus your money protected. Same savings, same veteran, but two completely different outcomes depending on one decision. Look, I built Victory X Financial because I watched too many veterans lose too much money to crashes that they just didn't have to be in. You already served your country. You shouldn't have to gamble your retirement savings on a market that's crashed 7 times in 26 years. So just click below, pick a time. Let's protect your money before the next one hits. I'm Dan Farnsworth, Victory X Financial. Stay sharp, stay ready.